we need to know what the value criteria is, and this is where you weed out the whole intangibles versus the tangibles. Like this one, high transaction rate reduction. Sounds like high priority, but the CEO said this is more important, so it's going first, period. But I call that the executive flag. There's always some executive that says, no, this is the one that you're doing. Okay, so we do it. So at least you understand that view in your portfolio, and you want to retain that view. So if you think about the pie chart in a loose translation, at least I want to do the 7% of all of these before I would do the 19% of any of them. Does that make sense? Right, so that's why I want to be able to break it down and say, what's the percent of not needed in here, so I don't actually do it. That would be an MMF that's really low prioritized. So I spend time figuring out, well, what are the criteria you use? And I go through all of these and say, what's the business value criteria for this? And I write it down, and I get all the overlaps, and then I start seeing how it applies. Breaking them into MMFs. So again, I'm going to look at prioritization. How can I take this project objective and I can break it into increments? Are you guys familiar with that type of decomposition? Okay. So I'll show you one way that I do it with the business, and we'll see. Again, my opportunity here is I can prioritize these across the portfolio. So I break a project all the way down, and I throw it into the portfolio. So this is where I can start seeing some of these increments go lower in the portfolio. I also look for features. So I take this MMF and find out how many scenarios we're actually addressing in the MMF, and can I split that and prioritize that in a further fashion? Do I need all the scenarios for this MMF or not? You know, maybe I'm following the 80-20 rule. This is the main success scenario. These are alternates, and I'm going to do the main success scenario first. Do you guys follow me? I get this release view, which is across the portfolio. So it's not like I do all one project before I do the next project. I do the highest increment, highest MMFs in an order. And you know, it might look like this, it might not look like this, but what you see is I've got increments from multiple projects. When I first started doing this, accounting was the one that had the biggest problem with this. They said, well, the team can't be working on more than one project. I said, why not?
System won't support it.
Yeah, so I had to go change the system. We'd have story cards where we'd have a budget line item on each story card, so we could work on the most important stuff, which then screwed up all our oversight. It said, you spent 60% of the budget, how many of those features have you built? None of them, because we were working on a different project. But it was the right one to work on, right? It had the highest value, so the business was happy. Accounting didn't like it, management didn't know what to do. Anyway, so you gotta go work with them too. The notion here though is this is a release perspective. I might be elevating into production more frequently to maintain integrity. So I decouple system elevations from releases. I don't try to get value out of every elevation. I might have to implement system technology because I got multiple project teams elevating on the same code base. So I want to maintain that integrity and regression testing, but this is when I can release and get my value. So get the notion of decoupling those two in mind, because otherwise you'll drive bad behavior. You'll try and make use of what you elevate for integrity, even though there's no release value. You guys follow that? That's an important concept, because what happens is it'll drive you to say, well, now that I have this much of the system, what else can I build? Or what else can I use that system for? And then you're no longer driven by business value, you're driven by system. So that's where that challenge comes into play.
So, could you give me an example of maybe an integrity release and a functional and a release?
Sure. I had in a project portfolio, there's 6 projects that are extending this one business application. And integrity of managing multiple project teams is that certain extensions to the system we would want to integrate and test, regression test and validate that the integrity is there, but there's no business value that can be used yet. So the IT department would say, we need to elevate in March for this reason, And the business isn't saying, okay, well, I can't use anything then. It's like, well, you don't need to know about it, other than there's a chunk of work that we have to do that you can't get features. So I put a chunk in their backlog. They would have no idea what it is, and it would be a technical integration. So it's for integrity of the system, not realizing value.
Were you saying that would go into production?
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be disabled functionality, or it wouldn't be enabled, but it would maintain the integrity. I think that's important for technology folks to start learning to do. And don't go overboard by saying, okay, I'm going to put all this stuff in there and just turn a switch at some later point, because then you can overbuild and you can, do some dangerous things. But you should be able to maintain integrity, because sustainability and going fast now and in the future is 60 to 80% of your development effort is going to go into maintaining system integrity. So you have to figure out the ways to do that. Otherwise, you're going to be paying for it by delayed business value at some point. So I would have them do a visual board, which is staying ahead of the development team. So this is what gets sent to the development team to build. So their flow goes this way intentionally, because this is the one they want to optimize. However much work is over here, it should be at the rate the team can consume. And so as the team's pulling work from this side, they should stay ahead of it and defining what the next chunk is. And they should be discovering the next chunks. This is part of that continuous replanning. Maybe they're doing this quarterly on a few things. They're fleshing out more detail. MMS over here, defining them and submitting them to the team. You just follow that flow? So let me show you an example. I was doing with some of you at the break. I do this with the business. This is all prior to getting a dev team involved and doing any kind of innovation. So they need to tell me, they need to be able to give me MMS. Oops. They need to give me a collection of work and then continue to feed that collection to the team. So the that portfolio view, container 1, I took the highest priority project. So I'll give you an example. ACH, just familiar with what ACH is? Automatic clearinghouse, like for electronic funds transfer. So the goal was they were going to spend, I think it was $2.5 million to do ACH, and they would reduce transaction costs, processing costs by having it automated. So I was asking them, what's the vision of this? What's the objective for this $2.5 million you're going to do? It was prioritized high, so I said, that's pretty good. You must know. And I kept asking, and they said I had a business case, a lot of volume of data, and I had a charter, had all these goals on it, and I couldn't see what I was asking for. I said, well, how do I know when I'm successful with this $2.5 million? So I kept asking the question. They kept showing me goals. They said, goals don't tell me anything. So I finally saw it. When 100% of loans was handled by ACH, and when there was a 25% reduction in checks. That's a good goal, right? You guys see that? I can tell, that tells me whatever I put in here, I can go and say, am I going to achieve this if I do it? And it'll tell me what not to put in here. If you ask me to do some feature, I can say, well, how's that going to hit this goal? It shouldn't go in here. So I'm saying that's a good